Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most critical questions facing artificial intelligence. How do we build an AI that we can actually genuinely trust? We're going to break down the new frontier of AI evaluation. We're all getting used to asking AI for answers, right? Whether it's a simple search or a complex request. But have you ever stopped to think, as the slide asks, how do we really know if those answers are correct, especially when the facts themselves are changing all the time?
You see, the heart of the problem is that modern AI agents are a completely different beast from traditional software. Think about it. Old software is like a train on a fixed track. It's predictable, it's stable, its path is totally set. But today's AI, it's way more like a self-driving car navigating a chaotic, bustling city, making split-second decisions based on a constant flood of new information from the live web.
And this dynamism, this constant state of change, it creates a whole new class of problems when we try to figure out if an AI is actually doing a good job. I mean, unlike old software with its predictable bugs, these new AI agents are out in the wild. They have to deal with the internet, where information changes by the second. Plus, they have to figure out what we mean, no matter how weird or badly we phrase our questions. So the very idea of a single right answer starts to feel like a moving target.
Because of all this chaos, the old way of testing AI systems, using these fixed, unchanging tests, is really starting to fall apart at the seams.
For a long time, many of the top AI providers have relied on what are called static benchmarks. You can think of it like a standardized exam in school. It's a fixed set of questions with an answer key that's already been made. The AI takes the test, you grade it, you get a score. Seems simple, right? But the question is it really telling you anything useful? And this quote from the research team at Tavali just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the problem. If your AI is supposed to be learning from the live, evolving web, then testing it with old, static data is like trying to navigate a new city with a map from 10 years ago. It's just not going to work. These benchmarks are just fundamentally not equipped to handle the speed of the real world. They can't tell you if an AI is up to date, and they completely fail when you ask subjective questions where there isn't one perfect answer. They're built for a stable, predictable world that, let's be real, just doesn't exist anymore.
So to tackle this head-on, researchers at Quotient AI and Tavali came up with a totally new approach, a dynamic evaluation framework.
Instead of using a stale, static test, they built an agent that's always creating fresh evaluations. First, it generates new web queries. Then it gathers up-to-the-minute documents from a bunch of different sources to avoid bias. And then, and this is the really clever part, it creates brand new question and answer pairs based directly on that new information. This makes sure the test is always current.
Okay, so they've got this new method, but how much of a difference does it really make? Well, to find out, they ran a pretty fascinating experiment, putting the old static way of testing head-to-head with their new dynamic one. The setup was really straightforward. They took 6 major anonymous AI search providers. First, they ran them all through a well-known static benchmark test. Then, they tested those exact same providers on a fresh, dynamic dataset that was just created by their new agent.
And the results were honestly staggering. On the static benchmark, which you see here in this first bar, all the providers did pretty well, right? Their scores were relatively high. But look what happens when they're tested on the dynamic, real-world data in the second bar. The correctness score for every single one of them just plummeted. But here's the real kicker. It wasn't just that the scores dropped. The entire leaderboard of who was best got completely shuffled. And that's what's so revealing. The AI that looked great on the old static test was suddenly not the top performer when it had to answer questions about the world as it exists today. This just shows how misleading those old tests were. Get this. One provider, which the researchers just call provider F, was the absolute worst performer on the static test. But on the dynamic test, it jumped all the way to number 1. The old benchmarks weren't just a little inaccurate, they were painting a dangerously wrong picture of how these systems actually perform in the real world.
Okay, so this is all great, but what about in the real world? Where you hardly ever have a perfect ground truth answer key to check against. How can we possibly evaluate AI performance then?
This is where we need to shift our thinking toward what are called reference-free metrics. So instead of just checking for a single correct answer, these metrics look at the quality of the AI's response itself. Things like, did it actually answer the whole question? Were the sources it cited even relevant? And maybe most importantly, did it just make stuff up? Did it hallucinate?
And when you start analyzing the results this way, something really counterintuitive pops out. The researchers took a closer look at the providers that actually cited their sources, and they noticed a fascinating pattern.
It turns out the provider that did the best job finding the most relevant source documents also had the highest rate of hallucination. This hints at a really tricky trade-off. It seems that in trying to give us a more detailed and complete answer, an AI might actually be creating more chances to invent facts that aren't really in its source material.
And here's the real magic, the proof that this whole new method works. This number, 0.94, shows an incredibly strong correlation between a simple reference-free metric like answer completeness and the old-school correctness score. This is a huge breakthrough. It means we can get a really reliable picture of an AI's performance without even needing an answer key. That's a total game changer for evaluating AI out in the wild.
So where is all of this headed? Well, it's all building toward a much, much bigger vision for the future of AI.
See, this whole framework, this new way of thinking, it isn't just about coming up with a better report card for the AI we have today. The real goal is something much more ambitious.
It's about creating what the researchers call augmented AI. Just imagine for a second, systems that use these evaluation principles to actually learn and self-correct in real time. An AI that can spot when its own information is outdated, identify an unreliable source on the fly, or even catch and fix its own hallucination right in the middle of a conversation, all without a human having to step in.
This whole framework really represents the fundamental building blocks for that future. And it leaves us with one final, really provocative thought to chew on. What happens when our AI is not only smart enough to answer our questions, but also wise enough to start questioning its own answers?